Good morning, friends. One of the things that has brought me so much joy from our study through the Lord's Sermon on the Mount is just how consistent Jesus' teaching is. And what I really mean in pointing that out is to say that Jesus lays the foundation of his teaching in the Beatitudes, and we can really see how everything he teaches after that is built on that, because we keep on coming back to those Beatitudes to reaffirm and to support the further teaching. Because in Matthew 7, 1 through 5, that we've been looking at, a big topic is being able to make judgments without at the same time being hypocritical. Obviously, the whole let me take the speck out of your eye while I have a plank in my own eye is just not going to fly. And so we have to continue to ask, how can I make sure that I'm not being hypocritical? I can't help but see things around me, and when I see someone else struggling with sin or even diving headlong into sin, how do I minister to them without myself acting in hypocrisy? And this is where we remember that our feet must be firmly planted on the foundation of the Beatitudes, because we know two things. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. And blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. You see, if this is what we are, if this is what we focus on, if we long to be the kind of people who will receive these blessings, then we will not be hypocritical, because that kind of hypocrisy will just be completely opposite to our nature and to our character. Because just consider the illustration of hungering and thirsting for something, and let's take it to the most basic level. Can you hunger and thirst for something other than what is taking place in your own body? No, you can't. When you're hungry, you want to eat so that your own body can have what it needs. And the same thing, of course, with thirsting for water. And so when we think about hungering and thirsting for righteousness, we must first consider that we desire righteousness for ourselves, that we would be righteous. So it's not a legitimate application of this beatitude to say, well, I just hunger and thirst for righteousness. I want God's righteousness to be present everywhere, in everyone else. Well, that's not legitimate if you don't first consider and have a passionate desire to be righteous yourself. And it's all the more obvious when we consider having a pure heart. You don't have any other heart than the one that you have, than your own heart. And so we must examine our own hearts to see if they are pure before we consider anyone else's heart. We turn our gaze then inward first and foremost. And what I mean by that specifically is that we turn our gaze of discernment, of wisdom, yes, of judgment, according to God's standards of righteousness, first on ourselves. Because then, having done that, honestly evaluating ourselves and taking the proper course of action concerning our own sin, then and only then can we identify sin in other folks and then how to deal with them. As one of my favorite theologians, Sinclair Ferguson, writes, to have strong feelings about the sins of others that are not matched by a ruthless dealing with our own sins is hypocrisy. So that's how we avoid hypocrisy, by turning that gaze of righteous, not self-righteous, but righteous, actual God's standard of judgment upon ourselves before we even consider turning it against anyone else. And that we have that character, we have that nature within us, that we hunger and thirst for God's righteousness, that our heart is pure. And again, the joyous news that we talked about on Sunday is true, because sin can be overcome. So just because you identify sin in yourself, it does not mean that you must consign yourself then to unending defeat at the hands of that sin. By the power of Christ, through the ministry of the Holy Spirit, and according to the will of God the Father, that sin can be defeated. And even when you are guilty of that same sin, if you search your own heart first so you become aware of that plank in your own eye, it is possible to have it removed so that in time you will be able to honestly and without hypocrisy be able to see clearly, to encourage and strengthen that other person to overcome that same sin as well. With that in mind, I pray you have a good and godly day, and Lord willing, I'll see you soon.